So, welcome everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Maggie Hendrie, and I'm the Chair of Interaction Design and Graduate Media Design Practices here at ArtCenter in Pasadena.
I'm Bob Dirig, the Director of Archives and Special Collections at ArtCenter, College of Design, and we're the co-PIs on this project.
We have two sign language interpreters today, Courtney Nimmersham and Mara Bassani Santa Maria. They'll be visible at all times, and you can pin them. And you can do this by clicking on the ellipses at the top right-hand corner of Courtney or Mara's little square. And just click on there and select Pin Video, and they'll be available throughout the afternoon. We also have closed captioning. To access your closed captions, go to the bottom of the Zoom tray, at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and click on the little up arrow, and then click on the closed caption icon. Notice that the captions are very slow to display and may miss some words. And ironically, these are exactly the kind of accessibility issues and challenges that we've come together to discuss today. The event today is hosted by the ArtCenter Library, Interaction Design Department, and our colleagues in Design Matters. It was also made possible through a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, for which we're really grateful.
And we want to start this event with a land acknowledgement. We recognize that ArtCenter College of Design is situated on native land belonging to the Gabrielino Tongva tribe. As we are existing remotely in 2021, there are many of us that are working, living, and occupying other indigenous territories. These other territories adjacent to ArtCenter belong to the Chumash, Fernandeño Tataviam, Serrano, Micanacan, Tongva, and Kits peoples. We also acknowledge that the land of California belongs to nearly 200 tribal nations. We recognize this incredible resilience in the face of systemic dehumanization and oppression that indigenous communities, both local and worldwide, have endured, as well as the enduring strength of spirit that their communities have shown in the wake of colonization and violence. It is our hope that this land acknowledgement is a first step toward rebuilding our relationships with these communities and to work together in an inclusive and equitable way toward protection of their lands, culture, as well as communities.
So ArtCenter is committed to maintaining a civil, safe, and inclusive environment free from any bias, coercion, or harassment, where we honor all our identities and respect and celebrate them. So we ask that everyone participating today be open to the views of others and communicate in a respectful manner. We also have Q&A in the Zoom, as well as the Slack channel. So we ask that the same respect and inclusion be extended to these shared conversation spaces.
With a project like this, there are lots of wonderful partners and collaborators we've been working with who we'd like to quickly recognize here. The symposium is held in conjunction with a studio class that's going on this term, and we want to thank the faculty teaching the course, Elise Coe, Joshua Halstead, and Todd Masilko, and our TA, Evan Stalker. The team at Michigan State University's Usability, Accessibility, Research, and Consulting Group, Jennifer Ismerl, Gray Pierce, and Sarah Swearinga. And Sarah is one of the co-PIs on our project. They've been instrumental in guiding us through the IRB process and providing guidance on doing participatory design with people with disabilities. Three archivists who you'll meet really soon, who helped co-write the Society of American Archivists Guidelines for Accessible Archives for People with Disabilities, Michelle Gons, Lydia Tang, and Sarah White. We also want to thank the Braille Institute Braille Institute Los Angeles Center, Regional Director Lynn Dubinsky, and former librarian Reed Streege. And we want to thank our Design Matters team here at ArtCenter, including Jennifer May and Stephen Butler, our ArtCenter Library Director Maria Asensio, and the entire library staff, our development team, including Daryl Morey and Christine Hansen, and other faculty and staff on the project team who have helped, including Sean Donahue, Sam Holtzman, and Kathy Folgate. And just a big thanks to everyone speaking today and attending today. We really appreciate it. To give a bit of an overview of how the afternoon is scheduled, we're going to get started in a couple minutes with the sessions, and the day will go until about 5 p.m. There will be one 30-minute break between the two sessions, which should be around 2:45 p.m. Pacific time. Everyone is muted and cameras are not on for all the attendees. we will use the Q&A feature that Maggie talked about a second ago in the Zoom webinar. Feel free to add questions throughout the event, and there will be 2 times at the end of each session when we will address the questions. You also have the option in the Q&A to ask anonymously. Readings and resource list will be added to the Slack channel. If you wish to add any resources, use the resource channel in Slack. And we'll put the Slack link in the chat. We also have 2 amazing illustration students, Osef and Audrey, who will be taking visual notes throughout the sessions, and we will check in with them at the end. Lastly, the event is being recorded, and the recording along with the transcript will be posted to our project website, and everyone attending will receive an email with a link once it's posted.
The symposium is actually the kickoff for a 2-year Institute Museum and Library Services grant. And as Bob mentioned, we're holding it in conjunction with a class that has the same title. Students in the class are immersing themselves in access-led design and working with people with disabilities to co-design prototypes that hopefully make digital archives more accessible. The students are also coming back tomorrow to participate in smaller working sessions with the project team and some of the speakers from today. This symposium is one of the key ways that they're informing their design directions. Today, our speakers are designers, archivists, librarians, educators, scholars, and activists. This multidisciplinary approach places the topic of archives into a broader context. So we'll be exploring topics like participatory and inclusive design, accessibility, and emerging technologies. We realize that the day will bring about as much discussion as answers, and the old and new friends will be meeting in the virtual space. So we will be keeping the conversation going through the Slack channel, and as Bob mentioned, we'll be posting updates about the project on our project website. So over to Bob to introduce and moderate our first session.
Thanks, Maggie. First session we're going to do today is called Where Are We Now? Understanding Today's Landscape for Access to Archives, Tools and Challenges. First, we'll hear a design perspective on this topic for about 15 minutes. And then we'll follow that up with a presentation on archives accessibility guidelines for 15 minutes. Following that, we'll spend 30 minutes, including speakers talking about the human experience and challenges of accessing and working in archives for people with disabilities. And finally, we'll have 15 minutes for a Q&A, but as we said before, feel free to drop in questions throughout. So to kick it off, talking about design, which seems appropriate, is Joshua Halstead, who I'll introduce. Joshua Halstead is Assistant Professor of Disability and Design at ArtCenter College of Design. Halstead has lectured in academic and industry settings from Stanford to Google, and is co-author of the forthcoming book, Extra Bold, a feminist, inclusive, anti-racist, non-binary field guide for graphic designers, to be published in the spring of 2021. Joshua is also one of our amazing faculty who is teaching the class that's held in conjunction with this event. In this talk, Halstead provides a broad overview of key logical tensions in the disability design space. Should designers strive to facilitate independence or interdependence with their designs? Should products be unassuming, or should they brandish disability identity? Communities of practice have different options, and Halstead seeks to elucidate this otherwise clandestine discursive landscape.
Okay, so thank you so much for the introduction. This is really awesome. I'm so excited about today. The title of my talk, which will be explained further, is From Point to Periphery, Material Discursive Kinscapes Within Contemporary Disability Design Theory and Praxis, a bunch of words that, again, will be explained. I'm going to start with a story, like I typically do. So this morning, I stubbed my toe on my front door. This is not a good experience for anyone who has done so or observed someone who has. What happened was basically my whole entire world got funneled down to my toe, right? So before I hit my toe, I was thinking about the day, I was thinking about, the presentation, I was drinking coffee and eating a croissant, and then all of a sudden, I hit the door and my whole entire world again gets funneled down into this kind of throbbing little pinky toe. And it made me start thinking about the connections, actually, because I'm a nerd and because of course I'm doing this presentation, about the connection between how we frame disability and the things that we make. So before I get into that, I'll just kind of explain, it's interesting. So of course, I'm curious about how pain works. Pain is primarily a perceptive process. So when I hit my toe against the door, what happened is that there were nerve cells that detected tissue damage. They shot these signals up to my brain, which moved information around, and then it centered on something called the salience network. And the salience network has one job. That job is to kind of tell you what to focus on and what to ignore in order to prompt an action, right? So in this case, the salience network said, ow, 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 that really hurts, moved, I'm gonna turn off my phone, shot motor signals down my leg, hit the nerve cells again, and then acted or caused my foot to pull back, right? So the idea of pain is this movement between reflection and action. Now, when it comes to disability design, again, I think that it might not be the toe, but it's our framing of disability that causes this process of reflection and action that really moves not just discourse, but materials, bodies, systems, et cetera, according to a certain way of being. So just to explain two terms that I'm using, first, material discursive just means that this idea of discourse, talking, whether it's through media, through literature, through design classrooms or design professional spaces, and the things that get produced, materiality, are entangled and inseparable. We can't really separate what it is that we think and the ideas that we acknowledge and integrate from the things that we actually make. And then kinscapes is this term I'm borrowing from Indigenous scholar Barbara McDougall, who studies Indigenous cultures, and kinscapes was originally used to kind of signify geographically specific networks of families that work together in order to survive. So I'm using this term specifically looking at how discourse on disability and design calls into being different assemblages, groupings of knowledge systems and socio-political systems, bodies in and out of the process, technologies, et cetera. So what I'm going to do in this short 15-minute kind of lightning talk is to basically talk about a research project that I did and kind of an ongoing project that I have for mapping this disability design space as it relates to discourse and the things that are produced. And I think it's important to this conversation, just so we have some type of a context for what our speakers will be talking about, because like any good conference, we've brought in a bunch of diverse perspectives. So I'm trying to kind of create this foundation. So in the literature review, I was looking at all kinds of different media types, specifically as they relate to the design practices, so graphic design, industrial design, architecture, landscape architecture, urban architecture, et cetera. Over the past, well, between 2012 up to very recently. And the key takeaway that I've found is that one's theoretical framework of disability, right? So what we think about disability, combined with our attitude or methodological approach to design, shuts in and shuts out certain ideas, discourses, bodies, social alliances, data that we're using in the design process, the technologies we're using, and more in the kind of action or enterprise of design, right? So how we're thinking about both disability and design will both, open up and foreclose different ways of doing the whole design thing. Here's just a couple of samples. I show it just to highlight that I wasn't only, I intentionally was looking at mainstream sources, so sources that are coming from corporations or larger universities such as Occidental College of Art and Design in Canada, who has been influential in kind of piloting this inclusive design guide. And Microsoft with their inclusive design guide, and then also more marginalized perspectives from disability cultures, like the Radical Visibility Queer Crip Dress Reform Movement Manifesto. So I was trying to kind of sketch a pretty robust perimeter around what I was studying, and therefore kind of opening up what I was coming to as conclusions. So here are some main tensions that I found, which I'm calling dialectics, but we can think of that just tensions, right? Little disagreements of disability design, right? And these are the questions that folks are asking. You know, should our designs be practical? Should they be performative? Should we kind of think about our solutions as being efficient, or should we kind of embrace uncertainty? Should we focus on disability design as a way to innovate, or is the kind of action of disability design really meant to cultivate and prompt collective action toward kind of emancipation and liberation, right? These are all kinds of different perspectives that are moving around in the disability design space, depending on where you show up. And underneath that, right, as I'm looking at it, and these are kind of codes, I started to kind of realize, well, it really depends on where we are with disability. Do we think of disability as an individual thing? Do we think of it as a social thing? Do we think of it as kind of this toggling between, or a liminal state between an individual and social or political phenomena? So really quickly, I'm just going to review some disability frameworks. Again, not in depth, so don't worry about reading these. This is a teaching deck as well, so I'll just explain it. But when it comes to like the individual ways of framing, we typically have the medical model on offer. We have the functional limitations model on offer. And the models that I'm presenting aren't linear. They all kind of exist still today. It just depends on, again, where you're showing up. When we're conceiving of disability as a medical phenomena, we're typically thinking of it as a bodily deviance from a norm. And typically that's a medical norm constructed through medical knowledge. So disability is typically thought of as a disease or a pathology, a struggle, etc. The functional limitations model changes a little bit, where it doesn't focus on disability, but it focuses on one's capacity to function in daily tasks, throughout one's day, week, etc. Both the functional limitations model and the medical model situate and locate disability within the body, and they don't think about intervention or rehabilitation when it comes to the social environment, right? Things outside of the body. In contrast, we have the social model, which argues that the oppression and discrimination, marginalization that disabled people face is due to physical and social barriers. So instead of locating disability and disability struggles within the body, it's locating disability at this kind of mismatch or misalignment between bodies that aren't compliant with norms, and environments that basically don't plan on these bodies being around, right? So both the social model and minority group model or socio-political model are ways to kind of conceive of disability as primarily this kind of social disjuncture between bodies and environments, and these are really important concepts for designers. The last three that I'll move through again quickly is this idea of critical disability theory, disability justice, and a political relational model. And I do this because what happens in disability design is there's actually a growing amount of academics looking at this. So we have to include academic understandings of disability in order to understand what's happening. So critical disability theory, the most important thing that I want to highlight here is that it actually says, well, it's neither here nor there. We can't throw away the body by focusing purely on society, and we can't throw away society by focusing purely on the body. So it's toggling in between, and it's kind of a liminal stage. And it's important here because we start to recognize the importance of acknowledging the testimonies of disabled people as the experts of their own lived experience. When it comes to the integration of disability studies, disability justice, we start to do further questioning, though critical disability theory does as well, of who those bodies are. So disability justice is foregrounding multiply marginalized folks. It was created by queer women of color who were also disabled activists, and continues to really think about disability as a multi-issue thing. So looking not just at disability, but ableism, and seeing how ableism overlaps with other interlocking systems of domination, like white supremacy, colonization, capitalism, etc. Right? And a political relational model is just kind of going back to this idea of liminality. So beneath all of this as well is this kind of attitudinal or methodological approach to design, where we're either seeing design, emphasizing design as practical, right, specifically a practice, or we're seeing it as processual, more emphasizing the process, or we're seeing design as something that can be really imaginal and think about, speculations about the future, etc. Right? So all of these kind of mental models for disability and design are creating these key tensions that we see, right? So moving through universal design or adaptive design or inclusive design up into critical design, universal design is conceiving of bodies, is locating disability more so in the body, and is also kind of asking, well, what are the, how wide of a net can we cast when it comes to the bodies that are included in the products and the experiences, the services that we design. Adaptive design is typically coming at the back end of projects where we might have either architecture or digital architecture, for that matter, that's inaccessible, that then kind of gets adapted to make it accessible. Inclusive design is really focusing on who's involved in the process, right? So again, kind of sometimes taking, when it's applied to disability design, a disability justice approach, where it's really thinking about, what bodies are most impacted by the designs that we create, and how can we make space for them, not only to kind of claim expertise of their own lived experience, but also be co-designers as well. I would put participatory design in this camp as well. And then critical design is really more of an attitude around design that poses evocative questions, challenges, and also challenges normative assumptions, and imagines alternate futures. And all of these kind of ways of thinking about and moving through design are being operationalized and mobilized by different communities to create different things. Bob, how am I doing on time? Because I lost my track, and I want to make sure I haven't
you got a couple more minutes.
Okay, cool. So basically, I'll probably just jump ahead to an example of critical design. This is a project by Sarah Hendrie called Slope Intercept. And again, kind of thinking about the idea of, yes, it should be inclusive. We're solving a real world problem, but at the same time, we're kind of bringing in other interactions to the design space and other bodies into the space, and specifically questioning kind of meanings and representations of disability also. So in Harvard Square, there was a problem when Sarah created this project with a bunch of storefronts with kind of a one-step entrance, which doesn't work very well for wheelchair users. So Sarah and team created these ramps that worked really well to adapt that environment. So the one-step entrance was accessible to wheelchair users, but it also became integrated into the environment itself, right? So it was then used by other bodies, other people, such as skateboarders, such as pedestrians wanting to have a conversation, such as folks stacking the ramps up on top of each other and wanting to take an image or a photo. So I think of this as an example of how, you know, our framing of disability can really impact this kind of kinscape, right, of who's interacting with disability design. You know, disabled people are benefiting and using the designs, but it's when it's taking a little bit more critical stance, we're also, as Sarah says, editing a city landscape and creating new ways for people to interact in that space, right? And inviting different bodies into the experience of that design. So I think with probably the last 2 or 3 minutes, I have lots of examples, but I'll just show some selected trends examples. So for us looking at archives, we've been studying very intentionally the Helen Keller Archive, which is, in my mind, one of those kind of flagship accessible archives that centers the blind experience. So it's completely decked out with lots of accessible features, and specifically when it comes to image description, the image descriptions are so rich that you almost, I mean, many times you kind of feel like you're right there in the archive. So that's a very functional way of looking at disability, right? And thinking about, well, what needs to happen in order to equalize an experience that's typically foreclosed for certain populations. On the other hand, a friction is kind of, well, how can we you know, think about design as something that actually draws attention to, you know, in a kind of a frictive way, social problems, right? So a lot of my friends who are wheelchair users have stories of people grabbing the back of their wheelchair and helping them, you know, unasked, right, across the street. So there have been this trend of wheelchair users that create these chair covers with spikes on them just to, you know, be a little punk rock, and then also raise awareness of, you know, what the social faux pas are, and also of lived experience, right? So I just find it really interesting, this intersection. I'll show just one more example, and then we can move forward. So another tension is this idea of limitation versus identity. So when we're thinking about blindness, again, as a functional limitation, then technology tends to try to fill in the gap between a body and an environment, right? And what this project is, Seeing AI, done by Microsoft, it's an AI software that can be downloaded on smart devices that basically it audibly describes the built environment. So it works with currency, it works with labels, it works with social situations. If you were sitting with a friend, it'll describe who's on the other end. Thus kind of attempting to normalize or equalize an experience, a visual experience of the world. And on the other end of that spectrum is this idea of identity, where when we think about disability identity, specifically deafness in this case, as a unique culture, right, as something that can be valued, just like other cultures and identities, then the ways that we design and the environments that we design actually start to change completely based on those embodiments and those identities. So Deaf Space is this project piloted through Gallaudet that looks at remapping and restructuring architecture based on deaf experience. So in this image is just an example of one retrofit or one design alteration that they've done, which is making hallways much wider to allow for comfortable sign language communication, right? And they've created this robust design framework for doing so. So if I can kind of jump ahead, oops, I'm going to skip that video. The point that I'm trying to get at, and I think if we can take anything from this talk and panelists today, is kind of moving from point to periphery, just like the toe, right? You know, I was thinking about everything, and then all of a sudden my consciousness was funneled down into this very specific point that then determined action. You know, it's interesting and important to kind of think about how the framing of disability and design, for that matter, become these points that really, you know, that frame and create opportunities and then foreclose other opportunities. So when we think about and have these discussions on disability and design, it's also important, I think, to go back up to the surface and realize that things like design, things like disability don't have stable definitions, and definitions that really fit across different cultures neatly. So it's kind of a challenge to kind of move in between and question how disability and design is being framed, or are being framed in conversations in order to kind of critically understand what we're seeing and what we're engaging with. So yeah, that's my quick scan, and I'm happy to stop sharing and we can move forward.
Thanks, Josh. That was a really good talk and setup for the afternoon. I wanted to take a minute to apologize to everyone. I know when we started that presentation that the ASL interpreter wasn't viewed on there, which when we realized that, we fixed it quickly. But I do apologize for any inconvenience that caused, and we'll work on making that accurate moving forward.